Hey, everybody, Steve here, local level podcast. I'm sitting here today with Octavio Duran, principal and owner of Duran Law Offices. He's a personal injury attorney serving the Chicagoland area. And you can learn more about him at dlochicago.com. It's a real pleasure to have you on, Octavio. How you doing?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we had a conversation about a week ago, kind of going over some of the different things that you do. You recently started your business. What was it, in September? So it's been almost a year now. And
Right.
how's that been going? You got a little curveball with the COVID, huh?
A little bit, yeah. Just like any startup, it was pretty tough in the beginning, working long hours, freaking out, wondering if I'm going to make it and lift this thing off the ground or not.
Right.
8 months later, things are a lot smoother. Despite COVID, things are a lot smoother. So I've got staff now. I've got a pretty good handle on how to manage my files, my clients. And I don't have 100% control or vision of everything, but we're getting there.
Right.
So that's part of the battle.
Absolutely. And personal injury, but you also kind of have a passion. You're first generation. What is it? It's Mexican American, right?
Yeah, correct.
And so you deal with the Spanish speaking community kind of as well, I guess, would you say that's your specialty, or how would you kind of define that?
Yeah, it's sort of my niche, I guess. Right, I focus on helping that community. I obviously assist on the personal injury front anybody who's injured. Period. Whether you speak French or
Sure.
Japanese or English, right? But I just feel that Spanish speakers in this country can be vulnerable and they can be exploited very easily. And so I want to be there to sort of not do that, right? To be the one to give them the correct representation that they deserve, need, and be able to do it well.
Absolutely. And so it's hard sometimes, because when we were talking before, like you're saying now, it's a community that's kind of taken advantage of or marginalized a lot of times.
Yeah.
People, I think, and then we'll touch on this a little bit, that people are afraid to make claims if they get in a car accident or something like that, because of the fact that they feel like they may be deported or something like that. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean it's basically that. So I see a lot of folks who never do anything when they're injured, when they're Spanish speakers, and primarily undocumented Spanish speakers, because they're just afraid. They're afraid that if they do file a claim, somehow that's going to alert ICE, like there's some sort of like central database, or it's going to hurt them in some capacity if later on they want to try to adjust their immigration status. Um, so there's this general fear and uncertainty by them, especially in today's world, with the politics that we have, that tends to be more anti-immigrant than not. I do see great hesitation with a lot of them, and it hurts their case a lot. And I don't think I explained this to you last week, because if one of them gets into an accident today, and because of those fears that I just mentioned, they don't do anything for weeks and weeks, eventually it's gonna be really hard to help them.
Yeah.
So if they go see a doctor about back pain 2 months from now, it's going to be hard to link that pain to the accident. So it happens a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah. I can imagine so. I mean, politics plays a big role, but anytime there's a language gap, there's also that kind of hesitation as well.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but that's why we do the show, to kind of highlight some of the different topics that people aren't always aware of. People, tend to think about their own life and from their own perspective a lot of times. So it's
Right.
good, and I think it's helpful to get outside of the box a little bit and hear some other stories. So backing off of that for a second, tell us a little bit about how you got started in law, because I know that from a young age you were really passionate about, you knew what you wanted to do. Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, and I did, and I say this somewhat jokingly. I realized I want to be an attorney from a Spanish soap opera. So my mom used to cook us dinner, and during dinner time, we'd sit around and watch her soap opera, as we didn't have a choice. It had to be what she wanted. She was the boss. I was like,
Right.
okay, fine. And one of the heroes was an attorney. So it started as general interest, right? But then when I got to high school, I joined the school's mock trial team. And then we won a couple of tournaments with that. So that was a lot of fun.
Sure.
Actually was I got the title of best attorney actually in my high school. And
Nice.
then I realized right then and there, this is what I want to do. And I want to do trials, right? I want to be in court. So when I went to college, I took speech and debate courses and really prepared to
Mhm.
just improve my skills and public speaking and so on. Went to law school, joined their mock trial teams, and won some tourneys there as well. So it was sort of cemented, I guess, with that mock trial experience in high school.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what did you say? You said that you started what was it like at like 6 years old? You were talking about wanting to be an attorney. Most people
Yeah.
are most people are sitting, asking for ice cream or something. You're trying to solve cases and do
Yeah.
trials. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about your practice itself. What do you do differently? What are some of the things that you kind of set out to solve for people aside, from the things that we just kind of talked about? What are the main things that you're kind of passionate about? What are you doing different?
Yeah, yeah. So, my vision with this firm was to provide a very transparent and systematic way to communicate with clients where they know what's happening to their case all the time.
Hmm.
And I can explain to them step by step what's going on so that there's no confusion from the early onset of setting expectations of the case to when the case settles. All of that together really helps the clients. They love the customer service aspect of it, and I'm able to do that because I use a lot of technology and softwares to do this. So I use one software that puts their files in a cloud, and I can text them from that. I can email them from that. Everything that we
Hmm.
send back and forth becomes a part of their file, and they have access to that. So they absolutely love that. They love that they know what's going on with their case all the time, so that they're not calling me out of the blue like, "Hey, how's my case going?" They can
Yeah.
just go on and check it out. So that's sort of been my vision, and it's helped tremendously from their side. And then from the internal aspect, I wanted to make things so systematic that we can be super efficient. And a lot of my stuff that I do is virtual. So it's interesting that, now because of COVID, we have to work virtually, but I was already set up to do that before. And I think that might be sort of the future of a lot of law firms is, you're not going to see these big firms in just one big building. You're going to kind of just see them scattered.
Right. Yeah, I mean, now more than ever, that's the way people. I mean, you're forced to do business, but I would imagine that that's kind of saved you, or at least set you apart from some of the people that haven't been so savvy with, kind of doing things the modern way.
Yeah.
I mean, from the client side, I imagine transparency is the greatest part. I mean, that's what you always want with an advocate of any sort.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, there's obviously a reason behind that. So you wanted to go through this because I figure, that communication is key. So what were some of the shortcomings that you saw in the industry? What are some of the things that you think are going to be after we get back from this COVID thing? Who are
Yeah.
going to be the ones that didn't make it? What are the practices that are just not going to wash? What do you think?
Well, so I think with COVID now, there's an expectation that you're supposed to respond quicker because you're locked in at home, right?
Right, right.
And so I think those that aren't going to make it are the ones that aren't providing or aren't responding to their clients right away and aren't answering their questions and informing them right away of what's going on. And I've seen it even right now. I'm getting a lot of clients who are firing their attorneys and coming to me
Well,
because they appreciate the fact that we're quick to respond to their questions. We're quick to help them with any needs they have. And so I think anybody who fails from that customer service aspect is going to struggle. So that's one aspect. I've already seen a lot of firms sort of start to tumble, if not close, because of the nature of their practice. And typically, it's been criminal law and immigration. They're primarily in court with appeals and hearings and so on. And
mhm.
a lot of my colleagues who had staff in those firms, they've already had to fire all of them. So it's been a pretty scary concept. And so I don't know, how they're doing. They're probably just hanging on by the skin of their teeth as far as finances and everything else. So
Yeah, it's I've been talking to so many people from different industries, and it's just everybody's suffering right now. So
yeah,
hopefully things will pan out sooner than later. But with with everything going on, I mean, you said court probably can't really even happen. So people are sitting around waiting for things to happen. Has it affected you too much? Or
it has affected. I would say primarily on the plaintiff side of personal injury, because pushing cases to trial is our biggest sword, our biggest weapon,
yeah,
to try to help our clients, right, to push them. And we haven't had any jury trials since the shutdown started.
yeah,
And the fear and suspicion is we probably won't see any jury trials for the year of 2020. So
wow,
that's scary because we're losing that weapon. Cases are stagnating. We're not able to close cases as quickly as we thought or had projected. And so small firms like myself, I think, are okay right now. Bigger personal injury firms with big staff and who are expecting these cases to go to trial and get verdicts on them. Now they don't have that projected income coming in, so now they're wondering if they're going to have to lay off their staff. So that's been pretty big. And I will say this too: it's somewhat cutting news. The Illinois Supreme Court did issue an order saying that starting in June, courts are allowed to be open,
that's great.
but they're leaving it up to the local county judges to make that decision. So what most of us think is that the collar counties, the smaller counties, will start to open a lot sooner, and then Cook County will probably be the last to open. So we don't know when that's going to be. We're guesstimating maybe September, October.
I couldn't imagine. I mean, especially for like criminal cases, if somebody gets arrested for something and then there's no judge or anything, there's so many you know extra days they would have to stay if they're incarcerated. That's got to be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah,
It,
and I don't know if it works like that or not. I couldn't speak to criminal law
yeah,
as far as how that works.
yeah, I'm not sure either. I can just
Yeah.
imagine. I mean, if there's less court backlogs, people are waiting longer. The system kind of was already pushed to its max for the most part. But
Sure.
one of the things, the reason I bring that up, and we talked about this last week, um, the fact that there is going to be such a backlog and there are going to be so many claims, so many things going on, so many things that have been, pushed back and pushed back. Uh, how do you feel about things getting swept under the rug? How do you feel about, claims being thrown out that otherwise wouldn't have been?
Right now, all of us kind of fear that might be a reality. We've never faced this. The court system has never faced something like this. So odds are that claims are going to be lost or misfiled or so on.
Yeah.
And so, how do you deal with it, especially if it happens, in large quantities?
Yeah.
The good news is that the chief justice, who is heading, especially the Daily Center, is working with a lot of the bar organizations to make sure that we stay on top of everything and we're informing each other and working together. So we're hoping that will avoid a lot of these issues that we were just talking about. But we're only human also, so errors are going to occur, I would
Of
imagine.
course. Of course. Yeah. Nobody's perfect. And I mean, it's not, obviously the government is not responsible for everything. I mean, the world is completely, going through the same thing for the most part. So I can imagine it's not one person's fault, but when you have a big system, especially in a big city like Chicago, um, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be, complained about on every side.
Yeah.
So that's hopefully, we have smart people in the right places to get these things worked
Right.
out. Now, as far as one note that I had is there are there like statute of limitations concerns, or are there things where if it gets pushed back or delayed that people will lose just on that? Is there anything that is relation to what you do? I'm just curious from a layman's perspective.
Um, I haven't seen that really be an issue. I think for the most part, um, if there is a statute of limitations that's coming up on a case, you can still file that electronically, file a lawsuit electronically to preserve the rights there. So I haven't seen that be an issue necessarily. What I have heard of is that certain deadlines by the court for responses have been pushed just because of of where we're at with an inability to process everything virtually, which can be good, I guess, depending on the circumstances. But I guess a backside to it is that the cases are still delayed.
Yeah.
So that's the one downside to it.
Hmm. Now, have you encountered anybody that's been maybe afraid to reach out because they didn't want to go to court or anything like that due to maybe getting infected? Has that played a role in anything that you've been doing?
Yes, but not necessarily for court, but more so because of their injuries. So
Okay.
that's another way that this shutdown has really affected us, or this pandemic has really affected us, because ordinarily somebody gets into a bad car accident, for example, and they'll say, "Yeah, just as a safety precaution, I'll take the ambulance to the hospital." They're not doing that. They're so
Oh,
scared
wow. Yeah.
of getting sick by going to a hospital that they're just taking their injuries and going home. And so we don't know what implications that's going to have yet, and that's on multiple fronts. On the injuries to the person, right?
Yeah.
We don't know if they had received earlier care, if they would have been able to heal quicker, or anything of that sort. But also the legal implications, as I mentioned before. If they wait too long to go see a
Yeah.
doctor after an accident because of fear of going to clinics and so on, it just becomes harder to link up injuries to an accident.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it makes perfect sense because I would definitely be hesitant to go out and venture to a doctor if they're even open, for the most part.
Yeah.
So I mean, how do you even accomplish that? I mean, for the longest, and I don't even know if it's changed now. Um, Making an appointment and going to see your family doctor or something like that. If it's a non-emergency thing, maybe you have your back's not right or something. Um, you're not even able to do that, right? So how does
No.
that work out? What do you suggest for somebody in that situation?
To find a doctor or group that does telehealth is probably the best thing to do.
Yeah,
There are some clinics that do take extra precautions with everybody wearing masks and disinfecting everything, and patient goes in with a mask and so on if they want to, do a person a to person evaluation. But that's, I would say, the riskiest part of it, right?
yeah,
So if for folks who are immune compromised or older, I would suggest, yeah, just telehealth is probably the way to go. And if I could just add sort of a tangent on that,
sure, yeah,
what's happened too now is, part of the value of personal injury cases is how much a person is injured and what medical treatment they require as a result.
right,
Not only are folks not able to get the proper treatment because they're terrified of getting infected, or their doctors don't have telehealth, but those that do, they're not able to get physical therapy in a traditional way.
hmm,
And so the value of their cases, these cases are going to be very low for them, and for us in the industry of personal injuries. So we've yet to see how insurance companies are going to respond when we say, "Hey, listen, my client has asthma. She
hmm.
couldn't go get an MRI, but it was prescribed. So can you account for an MRI price in a settlement?" And they're probably going to say no.
Wow.
So yeah, so we'll see how that happens.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many unknowns. I mean, it's the that's everything. Everything I have to say is, oh well, we don't know. I don't
Yeah,
think anybody really
yeah,
has anything.
big
Now,
big question marks, right?
another question that I have is, so say for instance somebody gets injured, and then as a result of getting medical attention, they get COVID. Say for instance,
Yeah, yeah.
who is that added to their injury? Is there liability that you would seek, or for that? Is that part of the equation in that case?
Um,
How
I'm
does
gonna
that
throw
work?
this in that we don't know category once again,
Yeah, right.
because the governor did issue sort of a broad immunity to first responders and hospitals who are dealing with a lot of COVID patients,
Mhm.
because it's too much to manage, right? If you get COVID in one of these facilities. Having said that, we don't know if that's going to remain or if things will change once and if we do get out of this COVID world. And what I mean by that is we don't know if there's going to be viable lawsuits that will do something on behalf of these folks. For example, I had one client call me whose dad broke his hip. He's older. He was taken to the hospital, was fine, was COVID free, went to a nursing home, contracted COVID, and passed away. So
Oh,
is there a
geez.
case against the nursing home? Again, big question. We still don't know. So there's a lot of things happening right now. There's no precedent for it.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it happens.
Yeah, and well, it's definitely beneficial to talk about it, to bring up these points because there are so many
Yeah.
things that are going to be debated, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. And since there are so many unknowns and there are no precedents for these things, we're kind of in the process of making them, I guess.
Yeah.
So these debates are very, very important, and that's why I like having people like you on the show. Um, Now, to switch it a little bit from, say an injury happening or going into the doctor or something. Say, for instance, you're in the workplace. Say you're in, I brought this up before, the Amazon thing, where they were on strike. They refused to work because they didn't have protective
Yeah.
equipment. And say they get something and they, is that going to be a liability? Is that something? Are there cases? I'm sure there's cases in the works now about that type of stuff. Do you have any insight on that?
I don't have any direct insight on it, but I would agree with you that I'm sure there's a lot of cases that are already being examined about it. And what any attorney looking into this has to examine is where did they contract it? And that, I think, is going to be the biggest
Yeah,
key, because
right.
if they're a delivery person, if they contracted it from building X
Mhm.
versus their own facility where they were, their shipping and distributing facility, what does that do as far as who's at fault for the contracting of the virus?
Right,
Or is it just a blanket attack of liability on the employer on Amazon for failing to provide the proper equipment?
right.
Um, big questions to stuff that we'll probably see unfold, in the next months or years. And it could be that, okay, listen, we did provide you the right equipment. You went to this building and we probably got it there. We probably got it in for 5 different buildings. So there's no way you can link it up to us. Case dismissed. It
Yeah.
could be one of those situations too.
And I figure as the devil's advocate side, prove it. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
how are you going to prove it? I don't know. I don't think you
Yeah.
can.
And oftentimes that's all that you need on a defense.
Right.
Is okay. Well, it could have come from many places, not just us. So, prove that it was us, and that could very well just dismiss a case.
Strange times. Strange
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, very, very fun topics. But
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, that's what people are all wondering. People are all wondering right now, all
yeah,
these different things. So hopefully, just these questions themselves, the right people will hear them and maybe ask them even more. Um,
yeah.
as far as a positive note goes, where do you see us coming out on this? What do you think we're going to learn from this experience as far as the law goes and injury goes and liability and all these things? Where are we going to come out on this?
My hope is that we've become more advanced and more tech savvy with the law overall. We joke that the law, much like politics, is controlled by old white men, right? And so it tends to be pretty retroactive and slow to respond to the needs of constituents, users, etc. Uh, I used to talk to a judge who I used to tell, listen, why am I sitting in court for 2 hours for my case to be called and it's a 5 minute status? I just wasted 3 days of or 3 hours of my day
Yeah.
doing this. There's got to be a more efficient way to do this. Can we call in? Can we zoom in? And at first he was like, no, it's hard to handle. Well, it's happening now,
Yeah.
right? So this COVID has forced us to see that it is possible to do that and to do many similar things like hearings. I mean, the Supreme Court of the United States is doing that now. In Texas, there's going to be a Zoom trial, the first ever.
Wow.
And there's be a lot of implications, I would imagine. And I don't want to go down that wormhole. But, my hope is that we do find ways to be more efficient with technology and embrace technology in the law and not run away from it like we have before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just with everything the way that it is, I mean, with the legislators and every like the Senate, the House wanting to do votes, they can't do it remotely. They don't want to fly in, and for good reason. You don't want to
Right.
go and fly in and put yourself at risk. So, a lot of things definitely have to change, and at the same time, there's security concerns as well. And things like that. So there's a lot to weigh, but I think that, yeah, I mean, a move towards a streamlined system, something that utilizes the technology that we have, it makes the most sense to speed things
Yeah.
up, take the burden off. Um, the government funding and all that stuff. I mean, you have to have much larger staff if you have no technological efficiency going on. So
Yeah.
hopefully that comes out as a net positive there. Um,
Hopefully so.
yeah,
And if I can add something to it too,
sure.
I think another positive may be that a lot of employers will probably save money in having less staff in an office if now they learn, okay, well, they can work just as efficiently at home. Maybe virtual offices will become a thing as well.
Yeah.
Commercial real estate will hate it, right? But anybody else who doesn't have to pay large amounts in rent and so on might benefit off of it.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up commercial real estate. I was just having a conversation with somebody a little bit earlier today. He told me there's another side to that coin there, where people are also saying that maybe they'll actually need more space because they'll have to social distance more. So they'll
Ah,
actually need, so I doubt that, because I feel like probably doesn't make that much sense, but
yeah,
it depends on who's selling you. The better salesman's going to win, right? So,
true, true, yeah,
you know, but yeah, that's it is interesting because also Twitter just announced, I don't know if you heard, but just recently they're not going to require any of their employees to come back to the office. They're
yeah.
going to allow them all to work remotely indefinitely.
It
So,
seems like tech companies are, for the most part, doing that. I heard Google was
yeah.
doing the same. A couple other ones out there. So
Yeah.
maybe they know something we don't.
Well, I mean, we have the internet. I think if anything has been proved, it's that our infrastructure, for the most part, is able to handle it. The load of people being at home, and that's a positive. I mean, we never have
Yeah,
that test. I mean, of making sure that we can kind of do the school work and do the Zoom meetings, and we've kind of proven that we haven't had any reports of big breakdowns in the system. So
yeah,
that's good. I think it can definitely be done, and I
I
think it's a
agree.
positive thing. Also, there's studies, lots of studies, that people are more productive only working 4 hours a day as opposed to going into an office. And you know, when anybody that works in an office, you go in, you don't really start working for the first hour or so. You get your coffee. You
you,
know,
you make et cetera, et cetera.
right?
Yeah, it's funny that we're discussing this now because I was just on the phone with my vice chair for the young lawyers section, and he's going to be chair soon. So his big theme will be using technology in the law, right? Sort of embracing what's going on now. And he did he crunched some numbers as far as the average commute of Chicagoans
Yeah,
per day, per week, per month, and so on. And I'm not quoting him verbatim, but he said in a lifetime, you're probably wasting about 2 to 3 years just commuting alone.
man. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So,
I believe
yeah.
it.
So maybe this virtual will be a change of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully, the traffic will die down, a little bit. Uh,
Yeah.
that'll be a positive thing.
Right.
And so let's get a little bit to, kind of the passion that you have as far as, helping and focusing on marginalized people, undocumented immigrants and, workers like that. I know that you brought that up before. And one of the big things is that not only are people afraid to report things, but they don't even know what to report a lot of times because they're not aware of their laws or of their rights. Can
Yeah.
you explain a little bit more about that problem and what we were talking about last time?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially that, right? So the hesitations of undocumented Spanish speakers of doing anything is they're afraid. They sometimes culturally they think it's a macho thing to suck it up,
Sure.
and a lot of times they just don't understand the implications that brought their injuries, the legal implications, let alone that they have rights to be able to do something. So they
Yeah.
think, well, I'm undocumented, I'm injured, but I'm not a citizen, so I probably can't do anything. And it's sad and it's frustrating. And for that reason, I'm talking to you about it, and I give a lot of lectures about it to nonprofits and so on, because education is key. And so little is known about that alone that literally earlier today, a colleague of mine called me because he's got a Spanish speaking client, and he asked me these very same questions. So even attorneys don't know,
Right.
if undocumented folks have the same rights as citizens. And so the answer is they do. Right. So they do have pretty much the same rights to file a claim, to get compensation, and so on. The only difference between an undocumented person and a citizen is if you're filing a claim for lost wages, because they may or may not be a paper trail for wages,
Mhm.
and especially for future wages, it gets really complicated because then you're looking at, are we going to talk about the currency from their country versus ours, and so on.
Right.
So a lot of times, that gets a little dicey. But besides that, everything else sort of remains the same.
And I think I didn't know that. I don't think most people do. I mean, like you just said, a lot of lawyers probably don't. So
Right.
I mean, besides reaching out to you, what resources are there? What things are in place for people to be educated on the rights that they have?
Good question. I actually don't know of many places that do provide this level of information. I think because it's not well known at all. So I don't really have an answer to that. I'm sorry. I would hope that a lot of nonprofits um, help with this information, if not try to connect these folks to attorneys like myself who can then provide those answers. But if there is a system like that, I'm not aware of it.
Well, there you go. You got something to do, right?
Yeah, I guess I should start something with it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I mean, say for instance, I'm undocumented and I get into a car accident in the city and, I hurt my back. Well, what is the first thing that I have to do? What should I do?
Yeah, the first thing to do is to contact an attorney and do the research on the attorney. Make sure that it's not, your average Joe who's a generalist or who does many things. It's got to be somebody who specializes in personal injury, has great reputation, has great reviews online. That doesn't cost anything. This line of work, we don't charge unless we win something for our clients. So, what I always tell my clients, whether it's Spanish speaking or English speaking, is you stand to gain a lot by working with me and nothing to lose, because we don't bill for our time. We'll never send them an invoice if there's expenses. So we take on that risk because we want to be able to help. And one of the big things that I like about what I do is I could be anyone's attorney. In the law now, there's a big push for access to justice. A lot of practitioners charge a lot per hour. Understandably so. They're entitled to that pay. They deserve that pay. But there's a lot of folks who can't afford it. And so, what can we do? Well, in personal injury, we don't have that issue. So your blue collar worker can hire me, or a multimillionaire can hire me, and the representation, the treatment, and so on will be the same.
That's interesting. Now, a question that comes to mind for somebody that knows nothing about this: if you are making a claim and you're undocumented, how does that even? I mean, if there's no documents, how do you even account for that in any way? How does the legal system even identify who you are if there's no identification?
Um, so there's documentation to the extent that there's a home address to the person, there's a car, there's an insurance policy that applies either by the person causing the accident, or sometimes even the undocumented person himself or herself. So that process is enough to get that individual compensation. When we're in the back end of the case, where we settle the case and the insurance company is going to issue a check for compensation to the undocumented person, all they do is they note that the person is undocumented, and that's it.
Wow.
Yeah, it doesn't go beyond that. They don't ask any questions or anything like that, and the person collects their money, and and it just works out like that.
And is this a regular occurrence? Like, is this something that is being fought like actively? I would imagine, there's people on both sides that have strong opinions about these things. What type of
Yeah.
pushback have you encountered in dealing with these situations?
I personally haven't seen anything specifically against this. as I said before, and as we probably all know, in this political climate, there are a lot of attacks against immigrants in general.
Yeah.
I don't know if this specific circumstance that I just described has something to do with it or not. But I personally have not seen anything where people are like, "Oh, this is unfair." This shouldn't happen. I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a thing that the majority of people probably are not aware of in any sense. I mean, it's something you hear
Yeah.
on the news.
Right.
You hear about the good, the bad, and the ugly on the news, all different things. But when it comes down to real life, people are not aware of the legal aspects of this whole thing. Get this fly. It's got me right here. But yeah, I mean, it's
Chopsticks already good style.
yeah, it's good. I gotta do that. I gotta get the chopsticks out. But it's a
Yeah.
fruit fly, man. I'll tell you, having these
Uh,
house plants. Um, we're gonna cut that out. But yeah, it's one of those things where education is important. Just bringing it out to light. So, what are some of the biggest things that people approach you for? What are the things that you have the most experience with in your practice in relation to workers' rights and all that.
Yeah, well, so in general, they approach me. Well, actually, let me answer it this way. I can assist my clients in every field of personal injury, right? Whether they're involved in a car accident, slip and fall, trip and fall, medical malpractice case, wrongful death, and these nursing home cases that I was telling you about. So across the board, I can help them. When they come to me, is because they have a lot of what I call pains not necessarily in a literal sense, but more like, listen, my car is wrecked and it got towed to this tow yard and I don't have any money to get it out, and the defendant's insurance isn't answering my calls. What am I going to do?
Yeah,
Or I went to the hospital and I don't have health insurance. What am I going to do with these huge bills? Or I broke my leg, I don't have health insurance. What do I do as far as medical treatment goes? Or there was a hit and run. I couldn't catch the guy. I don't have car insurance. Well, who's going to pay for anything, right?
yeah,
So it's a
right.
lot of these different real reasons and pains that they reach out to me. And these are the reasons why they end up hiring me, right? It's because I can assist with all of those areas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a wide range personal injury. I mean, there's lots of different
Yeah.
things. I mean, people get hurt in so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's got to be. I mean, what's your favorite part of what you do? Would you say? What's the most gratifying thing that you help people with?
For me, it's actually on the workers' compensation side,
Okay.
on two fronts. Number one, a lot of times when these folks are injured, and it's usually an undocumented person, the employers flat out deny them workers' compensation rights in many ways. They tell them they don't have workers' compensation coverage when they do,
Mhm.
or they say, I'll send you to this like side doc here. I'll pay for your medical bill. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. And that's the extent of the treatment. We get involved, we get them that workers' compensation insurance coverage that did exist, make sure that they get the treatment that they deserve, that they're being denied, make sure that they're getting their checks, or I'm sorry, their pay that's supposed to come to them
Mhm.
when they're the main breadwinner and they can't work because they're so injured. That is the most gratifying part of this, is that I literally feel like I'm saving them to a certain extent, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
providing access to healthcare, and income that they desperately need. And at the back end, they get compensated for what happened to them. So that feels really good. Now, sometimes too, and you and I were talking about this last week. We have these day laborers, and day
Yes.
laborers aren't entitled necessarily to workers' compensation benefits. Usually, those kick in, or are triggered when you have someone who's a W-2 employee. If it's an independent contractor, it gets really complicated. If it's a day laborer, even more, right? And
Yeah.
so a lot of these day laborers usually are, stereotypically the ones that you see waiting for a job in Home Depot or so on. So if they get injured, then what happens to them? And that is the answer right now, is that they don't have access to much.
Right.
So that's why I teamed up with this nonprofit I was telling you, which is the Northside Latin Progress. So they work with these day laborers, they clothe and feed them. And so because these day laborers don't have many rights, a lot of my proceeds go to them, so that we can provide clothing and food and so on for them.
Wow. And what was the name of that foundation again?
It's the Northside Latin Progress. Gretchen Moore is the founder and executive director there. Very, very nice lady. She's been doing this for years. And we met about a couple of years ago. And I told her, listen, I think this is what I'm going to do. I think this is what we have to do, because in this world of workers' compensation, it's probably our only option right now until something else changes.
Yeah. Now, you say until something else changes. What are some of the things that you would like to see in the world, kind of change for the rights and the
If there was some sort of a work permit establishment, and I don't know if it would be via a nonprofit or the government itself, but if these day laborers had, a pathway towards becoming a W-2 employee and had access to some sort of limited health care, or workers' comp benefits, it would fix this.
yeah,
But I understand that on the employer side, it costs money to do that, and so that's why the system is what it is now. I would like to see that change. I don't know, if there's any push for it right now, or
mm,
if there will be.
yeah? I'm getting killed by fruit flies right now. I don't know why, but yeah, I got all the windows closed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many different things that everybody's kind of like fighting for. There's so many different things that like you know citizens' rights and against undocumented rights. I think that you know that's like the last priority for so many people. So what does it take for the everyday citizen to do the work that the government may, probably not end up doing? What can normal people do to help these people?
Um, besides taking up lobbying or talking to lobbyists to see if we could, make some real changes. As far as legislation goes, I think joining nonprofits like the Northside Latin Progress is a good way to go. Donating clothes, go through their boyfriend's dad's closet, anything that they're not using, give to Northside Latin Progress, because they desperately need that. And that's, I think, an immediate impact that a lot of folks can provide to these day laborers.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a huge amount of people that are going to be willing to do charity. The more fortunate people that come out on top through this crisis. I think there's going to be a large amount of people that are going to be willing to give and do the right thing for people, because everywhere you look, there's somebody that's really really struggling. For every community has its winners and its losers, and I think that if everybody kind of took a step back, I think we've had an opportunity since we've been shut down and since we've been, kind of had some time to reflect. I think we all kind of are starting to realize that, our communities are important. Everybody in our community is important. So,
Yeah.
those are the things that I think that's going to be a positive change as well. So,
Yeah.
I hope it is, definitely. And for anybody that's having any problems, obviously contact you. You're in Chicagoland. The website is dlochicago.com. That is the Duran Law Offices, and they can go on the website and get your phone number and contact you.
Yeah.
Are there any words of advice that you'd like to give to people before we go? Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I sort of give these three things not to do after an accident, right?
Okay,
And the
perfect.
the biggest one is, do not give any recorded statements before you talk to an attorney. Whether it is your employer, whether it is your insurance carrier, just talk to an attorney first. It won't cost you anything. Like I said, and you have nothing to lose, and you'll get better guidance. Also, don't just leave the scene. Take photographs if you can. Document everything, because evidence goes away very, very quickly.
Right.
And always follow the advice of the attorney, because that's only going to help. I would say, follow those steps, and that'll help you a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's always good advice. I mean, you know, find somebody that knows more than you on a subject, seek help, seek
Yeah. Yeah.
legal help. When you're in legal trouble, definitely is good advice all the way around. And with that, I really do appreciate you coming on the show. Very helpful information. And if anybody's interested in the information that we talked about and the organization that we talked about, we'll put the links in the description below. But Octavio, I really really appreciate you. And
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
yep, good luck with everything. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.